There's a third thing that maybe he was addressing, and maybe the most difficult to admit, that this kind of turns that last statement around a little bit and says that now I have to admit that there's a solution. There's one thing for me to admit that there's a problem. Maybe he didn't have an issue with that. But now he has to think there is a solution. If I say that there's a problem but no solution, there's no guilt. There's no pressure. There's no stress other than my obvious 38-year deal. But now if I say that there is a better way of being, now I have to make a choice. Jesus says, do you want to get well? I'm not sure how to answer that. You've got to stop and think. Do I want to be identified in another way? This guy says, here's his answer. I have no man to help me. Note that he did not say, nobody is here to heal me. Or, do you want to heal me? No. This guy is only thinking in one way. The only way I get better is to get over to the water in case it bubbles up. So now he's thinking, as far as I can tell, he says, I have no man to help me. Not help me, but maybe hang out with me a little bit. So in case it does, you can be the guy that drags my 38-year body into the water. So maybe I'll get better. You see the difference that's there? Jesus didn't go there with him, though. Jesus didn't say, hey, I'll hang out with you a little bit. Sure, let's sit down and let's talk about the life that you got. He didn't do that. He took command of the situation and he said, stand up. Roll up this bed and walk. Get out of here. Take the badge off. You don't need the angel. You don't need the water. The source of living water is here. Isn't that great? What an amazing story. Now, there's a third thing I want to look at. It's this one. The Pharisees were living on the wrong way for satisfaction. So now, when we think about these Pharisees, they're great guys. Listen, I'm not an anti-religious fellow. I'm not against religions in the world, not at all. Some people say, hey, Joel, you're a pretty religious guy. Some people ask me, are you religious? And I don't ever know how to answer that because I don't know where they're coming from. I don't think that religious people are wrong at all necessarily. These guys, however, were living in a completely wrong way to find solution. These guys had their whole mentality wrapped up in the law that would somehow make them better. It was the law that was going to do it. Somehow, now the issue is that not only that, but they were thinking, this law, if we could just follow enough rules, if we could just make enough and be faithful enough to the rules, then the Jews thought that God was going to come along, the Shekinah glory that they read about was going to come along, and they were going to get all better. So now, I don't think it's a coincidence that these two things are intertwined. The guy, the 38-year guy, he's by the pool waiting for an angel. If I wait long enough, I can do this. The Jews come along and say, if we do this long enough, then this is going to happen. Both of them are looking in the wrong direction. The issue, however, is that when Jesus looks at the 38-year guy, you want to get well, there was this openness, and when he talks to the Jews, there was this close. Same, very different. Completely different, as a matter of fact. They were trying to keep the law, but it was just as unsatisfactory. Problem was, too, that whenever it came along and the guy was fixed, the guy was healed, now all of a sudden their hair goes on fire because they realize that not only have you okay, you're healed, okay, well that's I guess that's a good thing, but you went about it all wrong. You didn't fill out the application. You didn't get the boxes all checked. You didn't get the red stamp on your application. You don't have permission to do this. What are you thinking? You're going to do that? Okay, it's great. But listen, this is the Sabbath. It's the Grinch that stole the miracle. All this anger because it was done in the wrong way. Now we got a problem because you see, we couldn't fix you, but now you just got fixed in the wrong way. Now let's think about this. We want to get it right. Now in order to get it right, this means that we've got to, I want us to just step back. And remember the four things I asked you to think about and underline the words of Jesus. Rather than depend on the commentary, let's just look at what Jesus said. And he said these four things, and I want us to hurriedly go through them. First one is this. It's found in verse 6. It says, do you want to get well? I want to get better. Are you with me? I want to get better. I don't want to be the way that I am. I want to get better. I followed the Lord for a long time, but ultimately, I want to get better still. I don't want to be the way that I am. I am not happy being filed if somebody else has filed me or I have filed myself. I don't want to stay in that file. I want to be a follower of Christ. We here at the river, we need to get better before we get bigger. We need to get better. And that means that we as a fellowship, we need to understand that in order to get better, we might have to change some things. Listen, the bigger you get, the more organized you got to be. And that means that sometimes the very small kind of little person-to-person kind of a thing that we have been able to do when we were running 30, 40, 50 people, it can't be that way when we're running 130, 140 people, which is where we are right now. You look around the room and you go, where are they? Well, for some reason, the boat tilted to the first service this morning. In the past, it's been the other direction. It really tilted this week. In order to do what we need to do, in order to ultimately get bigger, maybe like what the Lord wants to do, we've got to get better. The little guy there, he's got to get better. Come on, buddy. You can do it, though. We ultimately have to come up with the answer that we need to respond to. Yes, I want to get well. Second thing he said, it's found in verse 8, very clear. Stand up, pick up your bed, and walk. This information, I find, these steps are very well defined. He didn't ask for suggestions. He didn't form a committee. He didn't look for consensus. He looked around the porch and he said, okay, all of you guys, if you've been here 20 years or more, raise your hand. Oh, you can't raise your hand, can you? Look this way. Oh, you can't see me, can you? You see all the problems with this? Jesus is looking around all of these porches and all of these sick people. They're lame and they're blind and and you look at them and Jesus just takes charge of that and he says, stand up, pick up your bed and walk. He didn't ask the Jewish leadership, hey, is this okay? It was very much outside of the norm. Very much outside of the norm. Let's think about this before we go to this next statement here. These folks were already unaccepted in the courts of temple worship. If you had some kind of infirmity, you were no longer accepted in the temple. Okay? You couldn't go there. So it's very interesting and very telling in our scripture where it says when Jesus afterward met this man in the temple, he is now accepted. He's been refiled. Okay? Jesus is looking at these people and saying, hey, you are not accepted. And so now the Lord of Sabbath is standing in front of you. Let's get better. Stand up. Take up your mat and walk away. These instructions were simple, but they were impossible. They were irreligious, but they were divine. Think about those contradictions. Religious and divine should be in the same category, but they're not. Simple but impossible. Religious but divine. They changed one man's life, but they threatened the life of the one who spoke them, because the Jews looked at him and said, we're going to kill you for this. You may need a miracle in your life. You know what? There's a miracle to be had. I'm no miracle worker, but I've seen them and I've experienced them. And I love to pray with you about that. But ultimately, there's a decision that you first have to make. Do you want to get well? Yeah, I got a problem, huh? Yes, there's a solution. Now, third thing Jesus said, verse 14 now. Now you are well. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. Jesus said in another place in Matthew chapter 10, listen to this verse. We don't talk about this maybe enough here, but it's all through the Bible. Listen to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10. Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Jesus is not using some kind of scare tactic, fear tactic, to try to frighten this man into somehow obedience or something. Listen, he had already healed the man. It wasn't like he put a carrot stick out in front of him and said, okay, now, if you'll follow me, I'm going to do this for you. Jesus never played that game. You look in Scripture. He never played the game. He looked at this man who had been there all of those years and moved with compassion. He said, stand up, take up your mat, and walk away from this. Walk away from this identity. Walk away from this weakness. This is not a scare tactic any more than the highway department is using a scare tactic whenever they put up a sign that says bridge is out ahead. Oh, you're just trying to scare me. No, I'm not. I just don't want you to fall into this chasm. Then it creates paperwork for the police. We don't want you to do that. Jesus is looking at them and saying, don't be afraid of people who threaten you physically. You do need to be afraid, though, because there is a judge. This is a reminder that there are things that are worse than being stuck on a porch. Friends, there is an afterlife. Listen to me. There is an afterlife. There is something beyond where we are. There's not a second chance out there that you can back up and take another run at this. Jesus was very clear in saying, listen, folks, there is something that's out there ahead. There is a judge. He is just. He is a fair judge, but a judge all the same. And we need to realize there are worse things than being stuck on the porch. Let's think about the fourth thing that he said. Verse 17 says, and this one really lit up everybody. My Father is always working, and so am I. This really got to these guys. Because in reality, listen to what he said. He said, 6 days you work, okay? This is what the Jews were telling him. You're not supposed to be carrying around this mat because that's some kind of form of work. And by the way, Jesus, what are you doing healing people? Well, on the Sabbath, go do things in 6 days because... And Jesus said, hey, listen, my Father's always working. Don't tell me when to work. Okay? Don't tell me when to work. My Father is always working. And me too. And this just